something is really negative, you are welcome to give us a thumbs down or a thumbs up if you're enjoying our session today. So can you also take a moment to add your name and your organization and maybe even your location in the chat box, just so we kind of get a feel for who is in our digital room this morning. Well, this morning for me, this afternoon for many of you. So I'll add myself and also say it verbally. So my name is Jess MacArthur. I am with ISF, but based in Switzerland. And very excited to be sharing some information on qualitative work today.
And I'm a co-host today. I'm Melita Grant from ISF. It's great to see you all. Thank you very much for coming to our workshop today. We know it's been a really busy couple of weeks for you all with the reporting for What If Women, and also I know a lot of organisations are doing data collection. So it's really great that you've been able to make this time to talk about qualitative data analysis with us. There's still some people joining, so I'm going to add the sign-in link again.
Super, thanks, Melita.
Welcome, everybody.
So today we're going to go through kind of 4 main sections. The first one is we're going to do a very basic introduction to thematic analysis, and we're not trying to be fancy or be overly, hopefully ambitious, but we want to just give some very basic, hopefully clear approaches to thematic analysis. Then we're going to present you 3 different ways that you can do it, which do not require any fancy software. So these are using things that you already have in your toolbox to be able to do these types of analyses. Then we're going to have some hands-on experience with 3 different groups, and we'll give you further instructions when we get there. And we'll do some reporting back. So a little bit of an interactive session here today. I hope that you are ready to do some interaction. Some webinars you can sit back and relax. This one we do require that you are ready to participate. So be ready for that in about 45 minutes. All right, so some basic on thematic analysis. I would just want to remind everyone who has been participating in this webinar series about maintaining confidence in qualitative data. And this has been a question that we continue to have from the wider group. Question I continue to have as I do continue to do qualitative analysis as well. How do you make sure that you're getting the right codes? How do you make sure you're doing a thematic analysis well? And so just drawing your attention to the analysis column in this checklist that we've been using as we go through this workshop. And one of the second box there on analysis is developing and using a precise code book and multiple coders. So that's what we're going to test and we're going to try today, what that means. And then ideally you would love to have maybe someone review your code book and look at it again to come back and make sure that you're having kind of a holistic perspective on the code. So you're not just doing it yourself, is the best way to make sure you're maintaining confidence. But before we get there, I would love for you to write in the chat box, finish the phrase, thematic analysis is. So what do you think thematic analysis is? Go ahead and add your answer in the chat box, and I look forward to hearing from you. What do we think it is? Give everyone a second to think here. All right, yeah, finding patterns, that's great. Maybe you don't know, and that's okay. You can add a question mark. Maybe that's why you're here. So coding qualitative data based on themes, yeah. Sorting data, yeah, by topics or themes, this is great. Method of analyzing, these are really great. Now they're coming in too fast for me to read. A method of analyzing qualitative data. The researcher closely examines the data to look at themes. Great. Wonderful. These are I don't see anything that's blaringly incorrect. These all look fantastic. So you guys, maybe we can just go home. Maybe I can go back to bed. No, I'm just kidding. The definition that I like to use is from Brown and Clark. And you guys have highlighted this in your definitions already, a method for identifying, analyzing, and reporting patterns within data. And primarily this is used within qualitative analysis, like you guys have all said in the chat as well. And so it's basically taking long chunks of raw text, finding a way to break it down into smaller chunks, and then identifying what those chunks mean, and different chunks can have multiple things that they mean. That gets a bit complex, but the idea is breaking a long piece of document into smaller pieces and adding color. That's basically the simplest way to explain it, in my opinion. Now, there's two different ways that you can really come to thematic analysis. The first one is deductive, and the second one is inductive. And often we end up using a combination of the two. For deductive analysis, the idea here is that you start already with your code book, but we'll get into that a little bit later. And then inductive is you allow the text to give you your codes. Complicated, I promise I'll have slides for that in a moment. And then on the other side of techniques, there are kind of three different ways that a lot of organizations use to actually do their thematic analysis. And none of these are wrong or right. They're just different approaches that individuals and groups use. So the first one is categorizing and grouping. So you might take Post-it notes, for example, like we'll do in a little bit, and put them all together on a whiteboard, and then group like to like, and find clusters and find things that are similar. And that would be called like categorizing and grouping. Another way of doing thematic analysis is to start with a framework or a canvas, and to allow that framework or the canvas to give you your Post-it notes, if you will. And then another way yet is to look at how many Post-it notes are different colors, how many Post-it notes have particular themes or content on them. So we'll come back to that again. These all have further clarification as we go. There are 7 main steps we want to think about when we come to this type of thematic analysis. So the first one, I mean, it sounds a bit silly, but it's a really important one. And that's to clarify the research questions and objectives. So if you come to your thematic analysis and you don't know really what question you're trying to answer, you'll find yourself often confused because you won't know quite exactly what am I supposed to code, what am I looking for in the data, what types of information am I trying to find. And so the goal is to start here with what exactly are you trying to understand from the data? What is your question that you're trying to answer, and the objectives of this research? So for us today, we're looking for enabling factors for women working in the WASH sector. So that's our kind of research, broad research question today that we're going to continue on throughout this whole process. But it's important to have that clarified from the very beginning, because that sets the whole line across everything, which everything will be added to. The next thing is to familiarize yourself with the data, which again sounds kind of simple. Of course I'd read my data. Well, it's sometimes long, and sometimes Netflix is calling, and there's other things to do. So it really is important to read through it all, and to read through it all before you do anything else. So reading through it, just like you'd sit down and read a book, or you would read a report for work, to actually go through and read all of the data yourself. And after that, I like to take a little notepad or a dictation software and just give myself a bit of a reflection of what did I find, what did I learn. And that process of having a bit of reflection is also very valuable for you as a researcher. The third step is to select your approach. Now notice I don't say select your approach before at the beginning, but it's actually the third step. And that's also important. So you're selecting the approach, the techniques, tools, and preparation of the data after you've already read through the data. And hopefully the reason for that is so that you will have a bit of an understanding of the type of data, the length of data, the complexity of the data. You'll know that already before you select your tools and approaches. The fourth step is to actually affix codes. Affix is a funny word for like putting on. So placing the codes to these field notes, transcripts, or accounts. And again, it's not just interview data. We often do interview data as qualitative researchers, but if you have field notes or observations from your focus group discussions or observations from a transect walk, these also are types of data that you could also code and also use in your analysis. The fifth one, going to the bottom line there, is then to sort and sift. I like this phrasing from Miles and Huberman, but to sort and sift the data to identify phrases, patterns, themes, relationships, nuances, terms, and terms, and looking for similarities and differences between them. So that's quite complex. We'll come back to that in a minute. And that's probably the hardest step of all of this, is that fifth step of sorting and sifting the data. And it's not something that happens in an hour. It's something that takes time, it takes sleep, and I really do mean that. It takes time getting away from your data, letting it percolate in your mind, letting it come, and then coming back to it after some time, and realizing, oh, there's a pattern here that I didn't see before, or there's a relationship here that I didn't see before. So we could put in sleep as a 6th step, or a 5-point B step there as well.
And long walks.
Long walks, exactly, yeah, absolutely. And you explain to your boss what you're doing. I'm going for a thematic analysis walk. That's totally legitimate. The 6th step is elaborating on a limited number of claims. So sometimes I like to say, okay, what are the top 5 things? What are the top 3 things that we want to take away from this data? And giving your mind a small number, 5 or 3, maximum 7, and I really do mean that, maximum 7 things that you want to take away from the data. 3 and 5 are good numbers. So often I start with a blank piece of paper and I say, what are the 3 things that I want to tell the world about the data that I have? Or what are the 5 things that I want to tell the world about the data that I have? And then once I have those things in my mind, after the sorting and sifting, then you can fill them in. And where do the quotes fall? Where's the evidence for those claims? How do we make those claims clear? Because you have them in your head, because you started by reading the data all the way back in step 2. And the last one is to test and refine these claims with reference to existing knowledge, theories, policy, and even discussion with participants. So you can't just let those limited number of claims, so those top 3 takeaways or those top 5 takeaways, you don't want to just take them for granted, you want to test them. So what did other authors working in this space say? Is it the same? Is it different? What did if you bring those 3 things back to the participants, do they say, no, you're missing this one, you need to include this one? And so testing and refining these claims is a very important last step before writing up a paper, which I didn't even include in this because that's a topic for a separate day. So I know that was a lot very quickly, but I think hopefully it will help you to see, if we go through these 7 steps of really what the fact that we think often that coding just means coming into the data, opening it in vivo, and pasting some color. And those are very valuable and important tools, but we want to make sure that we see it from the very beginning, which is the very beginning of clarifying the question, all the way through to testing those claims that you make with participants or with theory and existing knowledge. And that's the wider picture of thematic analysis. So maybe I will pause there. That was a lot of information quite quickly. I tried to make it interactive and fun, so maybe I'll make it a bit more interactive now. Does anyone have any questions about the 7 steps? Feel free to pop them in the chat.
Thank you, Jess. That was really clear. And sorry for those people that were sitting in the waiting room for a little bit then. I didn't get a pop-up message, so sorry for that. And there's just a sign-in sheet, so we've just added a link there for you to have a look at, and just provide your consent for this recording to be taken and to be used as part of the hub. Still some people coming in, so yeah, feel free to pop in any questions you have for Jess about those 7 steps in the chat. Does anyone have any questions at this stage? Is the terminology comfortable for you? Do you know what we mean by codes, themes, and data, transcripts, all these sorts of terms? Let us know if any term we use is not crystal clear, because it would be really great to make sure that everything's super understandable. So Sylvie has just put a question there. Any tips on how to sort of choose the 3 main statements?
It's tough. And I'll say it's more of an art than a science, which might get me into trouble a little bit. But I really do believe that qualitative research is an art. I actually think all research is an art. And one of the most important things is your gut is actually quite valuable. And I might get in trouble for saying this, but it's not as maybe academic and as rigorous, but your gut is actually quite usable as a research analysis tool. Like I said, normally what I do is I start with a blank piece of paper and I say, if I can only tell the world 3 things about what I've learned, what would those 3 things be? And I'll sit with that for half an hour and I'll say, okay, I'll write out a sentence. And then if that say, oh no, but what about this? And then I'll write that down and then I'll cross things out and I'll refine it and refine it. And anyone that works with me will know I often have a large stack of white paper with textures markers with me. Yeah, so, and I write them out and then wipe them out and come back and back and back. So it's not something that happens in even an hour. It sometimes takes a couple of days, which is why qualitative analysis takes time. Any analysis takes time. But you can do it quickly. If you're with a group of people, you can brainstorm and say, okay, what are the 3 things you would say? What are the 3 things you would say? And then you kind of find the similarities and the differences as well. And then maybe you expand it to 4, or maybe expand it to 5, but it's a good way of starting. So John says, interested in the choice of approaches happens at this analysis stage rather. Yes, absolutely. So the question I think, John, you're asking is, wouldn't you want to find out what analysis or analysis method you are doing before you even start collecting the data? Yes, absolutely. I think we're looking really specifically at the specific analysis approach of using which type of thematic analysis are you going to do. We don't have time to get into that as much today, but one example could be, are you going to use someone's words? Like, are you going to use participants' words or respondents' actual words as the code? Or are you going to make up your own code name? And that's kind of a simple, like quite a detailed level, but that would be the level of detail that I think is valuable at that particular space. And again, you want to always start at the very, very beginning, like we've talked about before in previous webinars, of selecting the main approach of coding. Is it going to be generally thematic analysis, or is it generally going to be something else? Okay. Just going to pick a couple more of these just because of time. So the frequency of coding to a particular theme. Yes, we will talk about that. So that would be one of in step 5 there, the sifting and sorting of data. One of the ways to sift and sort is to identify how often a particular theme comes up. And again, there are multiple ways of doing that as well. And another question, so mind maps are also super helpful. Yes, absolutely. Mind maps are a great way. And I just love to start with a piece of blank paper. I think a sheet of white paper is a spectacular way of allowing your mind to get some clarity. And how might we use qualitative analysis to test and develop theories of change for a program? That's a great question. I think we can get into that a little bit later because it's a bit bigger of a question than maybe is even for this webinar, but it's a really good thing to think about because that's the whole point. That's the whole reason we're doing qualitative analysis in this project and in this wider program is to try and test our theories of change in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there, Jess. We've got a few processes we've worked with some CSOs on to attach your monitoring evaluation methods to your theory of change. And it may be qualitative, it may be quantitative. It depends what change you're trying to observe. So obviously if it's, your theory of change is that you're going to have 10,000 toilets installed, you're going to want to count that. And so that's going to be attached to your theory of change as the indicator for that change. But if the change is around GEDC, norms shifts and changes and societal changes around gender norms, then qualitative approaches are going to be really pertinent and useful for that because there's nuance and there's story and there's experience that needs to come through. So if you were to try and see whether or not gender norms had changed in the communities that you're working in and have attitudes changed or behaviours changed, then you would want to use most definitely a qualitative approach or a mix of quant and qual. And then you could very clearly attach that to your theory of change because that's what your program is trying to actually change in the society. So I think that is a fantastic point that with any monitoring evaluation process or research, you want to be attaching it to a bigger picture theory of change, or whether it be at a programmatic level or organizational level. And there's many different ways, like our previous webinars have talked about. You can stage your methods around quant, qual, quant, qual, qual, quant. You can do it simultaneously. There's lots of different varieties of combinations of mixed methods based on what change you're trying to observe in the world. So I think that one of our tools when we come to launching the website, bringing all the curated methods together, will actually be an example of how you can use qualitative tools such as most significant change, for instance, and then the analysis process that's part of that, how to connect that to your theory of change. So thank you. That's a really great point. And I'm wondering if there's another question from Sering here.
Yeah, so I'll just respond to that.
Thank you,
This is
Jess.
a really good question around bias. And I think if you remember previously, we've talked about the value of bias, And I know this sounds a bit funny, but you come with your own specific background and your own specific experiences that will allow you to read the data in a certain way. And often we are trained, especially in the quantitative sense, to see that as a negative thing. I would love for us to be able to approach it slightly differently and to see that as a positive aspect, because each one of us is going to read the data differently. We're going to bring different things to it. And that will allow us, instead of maybe instead of using the word bias, that will allow us to see different things in the data. And it's good. It allows us to bring our different and new perspectives. But you're 100% right. That is why the best way to do thematic analysis is not by yourself. So 100% agreed. That's why ideally you want to work with a team. Ideally you want to have people review your work. Ideally you want to keep a reflection journal or diary as you go and show that to someone and say, what do you think about this? You know, good researchers won't keep everything to themselves and just stay in a little bubble and say, I'm going to just do it myself and get it done and then hand over my report. The best type of research, qualitative, is, can I have a coffee with you so that I'm able to discuss this theme that's coming out? This is the evidence that I have for it. Do you think that I'm on point? Do you think that I'm not on point? These are the 3 things that I've come up with. Are you able to help me look at this? And I think it's that working collaboratively and recognizing that different people on your team will have different ways of thinking about the data, and to see that as a benefit and not as a weakness. But it's really important to not do it by yourself. So fantastic, fantastic point. Yeah, these are really, really critical things. But I will, when I read data, come with my own mindset. You know, I lived in Bangladesh for 6 years. So when I read data from South Asia, that is always in my mind. And I could see that as something that is negative, or I could see it as something that gives me an ability to see the data in a different way. Whereas Melita might come at it with her experiences in India and look at it from a slightly different perspective, in the Bengali perspective, but we might be able to both look at data and find different things and be able to discuss together and create even richer themes and analysis because of our unique experiences. So this is such an important part, and so I'm happy to spend a little bit more time on it because it's really valuable. Yeah, Melita, do you have anything else to say?
No, that's great, Jess. And we're going to be doing our practical worked examples soon. And a lot of that comes back to, if you do make you do have your top 3 findings, or, what you're seeing is jumping out from the data, always having that evidence sitting behind it and being able to explain it, because that's pretty much the best anyone can do. If you've got a claim, but you can actually substantiate it with, well, this person said this person said that, and that person said that. Therefore, we think that this is significant because of those statements. That's the best anyone can do, given the data set. So yeah, have confidence in your ability to make sense of the information if you go through it systematically, like we're going to show you.
Yeah, great. So I want to kind of go into those 4 kind of categories, or 3 categories. Thank you so much, Melita. So we talked, the 3 kind of categories were categorizing and grouping, frameworks and canvases, and content frequencies. So I'm going to explain those a little bit more. You might have data. This is a little bit preschool version, but hopefully it's clear. So you might have data that looks like this. So you have some things that have little red circles or blue squares. Imagine that these are different types of themes. And so you can pull those out and you could maybe sort them by color, or you could sort them by shape. So you could, you're trying to find similarities and find ways to bring things that are like to like. So you might have, I'm trying to think of a hypothetical example. Well, I can give my example for my PhD because I'm in the middle of coding. So I might have a whole list of different types of codes, but how do we make sure that we bring those codes together? So I have two codes. One is around things that people get, and one is around money. And after thinking about it over and over, I realized both of those codes are really similar. Okay, so one is a circle and one is a square, but really they're quite the same. And so I brought them together into one cluster called things and money. It's not very explicit right now, but that's the idea. Or you might group them by shape. I mean, this is really simple, and it's a bit difficult to do with hypothetical data, but this is a way of Thank you, Alita. Yeah. So that's kind of one way. The second way, this looks a little bit more complex, is to break down responses by groups or gender or age, for example. So you might have, you see on the first table there, you might have all of your different codes. You might have things, changes in money, changes in how someone thinks about gender, and you might write down the number of occurrences. So one code happens this many times, and then you want to look at the number of respondents. So, or the number of occurrences and the number of responses. And that's quite a unique and important thing to focus on. So you might code, and someone coding might have a yellow highlighter and might highlight the whole entire paragraph, or might highlight a lot more than you would highlight. So one way is to count the number of actually times someone picks up a highlighter and highlights a line, or how many times one particular interview or one response has the yellow highlighter picked up. And those are two different ways of measuring. I personally like to use a second way. So just whether or not that particular code occurs in an interview, and not necessarily how many times does it occur, because how many times does it occur is much more difficult to replicate between different types of people. And then you want to give an example. So this, an example of this highlight might be this, or an example of this code might be this. You can also do a frequency table like you see here with color. So you see the codes at the top and the interviews. I'm just using interviews as an example at the bottom, and you say, okay, this is the number of times that this particular code came up. So this idea is using kind of content frequencies, and this is quantifying the qualitative data. So you always want to clarify with examples. You can investigate co-occurrences, so codes that occur together. So if you notice that the code women's participation, for example, comes up a lot with women's leadership, you might want to look at those two and find out what is the reason that these codes seem to be linked. And then if a code only comes up once or twice, that's not something to ignore. That's actually really important. So there's also value in the gaps. So for example, in my data that I'm currently in the middle of, which is why it's top of mind, only one person of 170, so it's a much bigger sample than you probably would normally use, talk about changes in safety. So I'm curious, okay, if only one person is talking about that, and they're very passionately talking about it in the interview, it's a passionate discussion of women's safety. What does that mean about how this person sees the world? What does this mean about the fact that maybe safety does need to stay as a code, even though I would probably, if it was just up to me, I'd remove it, only one person's talking about it. But don't ignore the places where there's only one person or two people talking about it. Maybe that also is important. And so there's also value in the gaps. The third approach is to use frameworks and canvases. And again, I'll talk about deductively and inductively later, because this can all be done inductively or deductively. But if you go into Microsoft PowerPoint and you do the shape, or what is it called? The shape, the smart art. Smart art. Yeah, you will be able to find a ton of little visual diagrams that look like this. And so often what I do is if I'm a bit stuck on how do I make sense of this, I have these three things that kind of go together. I've got women's participation, women's leadership, and women's decision making in the office. How do these things go together? I might type those three things into a smart art. It sounds silly. And then just go through the smart art list and say, okay, is it a relationship that looks like this? Is it a linear flow, or is it something that's more like a Venn diagram? Or does it fit into a matrix, or is it hierarchical? And I use that smart art as a way of trying things to see what fits. And I know that sounds a bit silly. It's a bit of a trial and error approach, but it allows you to put those codes or those themes that you might want to relate together. Remember, we talked about relationships of different things. So again, participation, leadership, and decision making. And I might put those into my smart art finder and then try a few different ways and pop up. Actually, you know, I think the best way to visualize this or to explain this is to use a Venn diagram, for example. So that's just something that I use often when I get to the kind of the end of my thematic analysis to find ways to relate the themes together, which may not always be necessary, but it can be quite useful. Now, just to also mention, yeah, I'll just mention with this one. Sometimes you might want to start with a framework or canvas as a way of using it as a prompt to think about how to write your codes. This is really specifically for, especially for like post-it note coding. So you might start with a framework and use that tool or that canvas, if you will, to jot your memory. So things like using an empathy map or a business model canvas, things like using a participation ladder, these types of PRA-based tools can also be used as canvases for analysis. So you might come back after 3 or 4 weeks in the field and lots of data, and you might put a participation ladder, which is a PRA-based tool that you might use in actual research with participants, but you might put it up on the whiteboard with your team and say, okay, in the groups that we've seen, who are the people that are making decisions? Based on all the evidence we have, who are the people that are making decisions? Who are the people that are just attending the meetings? And you can see the ladder being made from those different groups. And so you use these canvases as a way of doing some sense making and analysis within a team. So you can use canvases at the end of analysis. You can also use them at the beginning of analysis. Okay.
I'm wondering if at this point we could also mention you could use frameworks that exist in literature or within the sector and apply them. So you might have a framework that has 4 dimensions of women's empowerment, and the 4 dimensions might be like that second one on the top row. For instance, one that we're using with the Gender at Work framework, and it's got these 4 dimensions, and then you're looking at your data and testing, does the data speak to that framework, or does our data tell us something that's beyond the framework, in which case you can then say, well, we actually found that we needed to adapt the framework. But it could be a good starting point as well in that deductive process, starting with something rather than the data just telling you what is there. Thanks,
Yeah,
Jeff.
exactly. Thank you, Melita. No, that's perfect. Yeah. So the coding process, remember we use that funny word affix, which I think is just a great word, to affix the codes. That's what we mean here. This is affixing the codes and a little bit of preparing the data. So the first step in the actual process of coding is to select the unit of analysis. So are you making the unit of analysis the respondent? So is it just, does this respondent talk about this? That might be your unit. It might be done by question. So a specific interview question might also be your unit of analysis, or a paragraph of response. You might use just a sentence or a phrase or even a word. So it really depends on your data. And that's why we say read your data first. Make sure you understand your data first before you select what your unit of analysis is. And that basically is, how much do you highlight? Or if you were going to do it a different way, you're going to cut up all of your interviews into small pieces. How big would the pieces be in order to put them in different code envelopes? So there's some great YouTube videos, if you have 5 minutes tonight, it's really quite fun to see people actually do this. So they take their entire interview data, they cut it into pieces, and they take each little slip of paper and they put it in different envelopes with a name on the front with a different code. And so how big would your pieces be? If you were to cut up your data, would it be by word? Would it be by phrase, sentence? All of these are legitimate ways. Just have a bit of a think about it and be able to justify why you've said which one you've said. Also, you can change this midway through, totally fine. Just remember to keep a record of it and why you changed it, because there might be a legitimate reason after you try and it's not working to go back and change. So then you move into your first round of coding, and that's what we're going to be doing today. It's just a very quick review of color coding, perhaps, or using another tool. Color is a really valuable tool, but doesn't have to just be color. To highlight, place, or tag a unit with a code. And we'll talk about this in a minute. Now, this can be done collaboratively and individually. It can also be done rapidly or over time. So this is something that you can do in an afternoon with a group, and then you come back after a couple of days and look at it again. Or it can be something that you do a little bit every morning for a couple of weeks. You can do it in lots of different ways. There's no right or wrong way to do it. And then you might get your code. So here you see that I've got this yellow and this orange and green codes. And then I'm thinking and I'm looking at my data and I think, there's actually a red code that's missing. There's this theme that when I really look at the data, I realize that there's this other thing that I haven't been able to add. And so you add this other code, or you revise your code book. You might break a code into two. You might combine codes together. And then you go through and you code again. So this means you actually go through with your highlighters, or you go through with whatever process you're doing twice. And that allows you to make sure that the codes that you have clarified are really making sense for the coding. Now, some people will even do 3 or 4 rounds of coding. So if you come back and your codes are breaking, like as in you break them into 2, you realize that decision-making is really about household decision-making and work decision-making, and those are really different things. You might break that into 2. And that's totally fine. So then you need to go back and read the data every time you've highlighted decision-making and check, okay, which one of the 2 does it need to go to? And that's completely part of this iterative process. Yeah. Now, we've talked a little bit all the way through today of this deductive or the inductive way. And I hope this visual makes it a little bit clearer. If you're doing a deductive approach, you start already with the codes, a sample of the codes, or a sample of a framework, or a sample of a canvas, of some kind of approach where you want to apply that to your data. So it's kind of top down. You start with a framework, a theory, or a code book. The inductive way is where you start from the data and you build out your codes. And so it's more of an open-ended exploration. Inductive takes a little bit more time often. And it's something that really, you need to be very careful about your biases in this particular version, because you are, especially if you're doing it by yourself, you're going to be reading from the data bits and pieces out. And there's ways of using participants' particular wording to make your codes that can make this a little less biased, for example. But it's a bottom-up exploration. And either one of these is completely valid and completely valuable, depending on the data that you have, the time frame that you have, the type of research question that you have. All of those are legitimate reasons. The team that you have, legitimate reasons to pick which one of these you want to use. So we're going to be doing inductive a little bit today as we go into our session. So how are we on time, Melita?
We're good, yeah. I think if we start the exercise in about 6 minutes, if possible.
Super. Yeah.
And have 20 minutes, and then, yeah, I think that'll be great. Thanks, Jess.
Yeah, no problem. So lots of folks have asked me about tools, and I have a giant list of tools, all sorts of different tools that can be used. So you may have heard of NVivo, you may have heard of Atlas TI, Max QDA. There are many, many, many different qualitative data analysis software packages. However, and this is something that I read about quite often in the qualitative analysis literature, that having a fancy QDA or qualitative data analysis software package does not necessarily equal better analysis. And so that's one of the reasons today why we're not going to be actually showcasing or allowing ourselves to use any of those softwares for our samples. We're just going to use Word, Excel, and Post-it notes because those are 3 ways that everybody can in this room. I think everybody should be able to find those 3, and so anyone can start tomorrow. And so we'll talk about dovetail and deduce at the end, but which are the 2 kind of that Melita and I both like. We're happy to answer questions about either of those, but we want to make sure that keeping it simple is actually the most effective way. You know, sometimes I do some big analysis in a fancy software and then I export the CSV and put it in Excel because somehow it just seems more comfortable for me. That is totally fine, 100%. And so I think I want to be encouraging to you that you don't need a fancy software package. Excel, Word, Post-its are all effective and useful ways. If you are doing a multi-user system, think about that. So if people are doing it one at a time, then it's a little bit different. Maybe you can use actual Word, like Microsoft Word. But if you want multiple people to work on it at the same time, maybe think about using Google Docs or another multi-user system that might be a little bit easier for multiple participants to work at things simultaneously. So dovetail and deduce are also options. They are low cost and simple and primarily online, but we'll talk about those at the very, very end. They're just kind of some recommendations from us at the end. Now, all of these methods can be completed individually and collaboratively. But again, as we've mentioned several times today, a lot of collaboration should be required to review the trust and readiness of insights. Okay, we've got like 4 minutes. That's all right. So we've got 3 approaches we want to share with you today, and I'll go through them really quickly. As you see one that you like, we can't guarantee that you'll get into your group of choice. But as you see one you like, if you don't mind, putting the number in brackets behind your name. So you see Melita and I both have a number behind our names. Melita has 2 and I have 3. You can change your name by clicking on your picture and being able, yeah, so you can change your own name and just add the number at the end. Yeah, so if you have one that you really, really, really want to, if you don't have a number next to your name, we'll just put you into we'll randomly select you into a group. Okay. So highlighting and annotating in Word. The steps, oops, pardon me. Oh, no, come back. Okay. The thing to do is to read through the document before starting, before coding, before doing anything. Read it. Just go through and read it. I know that sounds silly, but we all forget to do it. And then you want to use different colors for different codes. So as you go, we'll have a chance to discuss this in our small groups, but as you go, you might say, oh, this particular response is about this. And so you might make a new code as you go. You want to make a note defining the code and the color and the reason why you've given that at the end or the top of the document. Just a reminder also that not all lines need to be highlighted. And you might want to also add any comments or notes in the margin. So they might be surprises, something where you're like, I don't really know if this is the right code, confusing things, places where you need to check with the person that interviewed or the interviewee. I also like to underline things that I think would make really good quotes so that it's easy for me to find them again. So use an underline or a bold or something else. And then this is my like hot tip. I like to use emojis. Okay, I'm definitely a millennial. I will give myself that title, but I like to use emojis for a very specific reason. If you put an emoji in your Word document next to the code when you enter the code, so I don't know if you can zoom in with your eyes and see here, I have a little toolkit on the red one and a little bus on the orange one. It's a bit hard to see. But if you Control F or search the document and you place that emoji into the search bar, you will automatically get a frequency count for how many times that particular emoji comes up. And so you can quickly and easily, especially if you have all of your interviews in one long document, you can quickly and easily do a bit of a frequency count of your different codes by using the emoji system. a bit silly, but it helps to make that counting faster. Otherwise, the best way is to print it out or to put it into a PDF and then to count them. This is a much faster way of doing that kind of frequency counting in Word. Okay. We're going through this a bit fast, but these will all be fully explained in the groups. So once you get into one of these groups, we'll go through it again. Tagging and counting in Excel. So we've built a little sample Excel worksheet for you to try this in. Once again, reading the document first. So go ahead and read, make sure you understand all the bits and pieces. Break the text into individual units and cells. So you might, again, it might be broken down by phrase or by word or by response to a particular question. You can either use one sheet per respondent or add a column with your respondent number and just be able to have everything all in one sheet. Once again, use underline to mark good quotes. And then I would like to do, I add a code in each column. And again, not all lines need to be coded. And then you place a 1 in each cell, like the cell row where the code appears. This will become more clear for those in this group. And everybody will have access to all of these afterwards as well, all of the actual samples. You want to make a separate sheet defining the different codes. So if your code is the little toolbox, like I have here at the top of mine, and the little bus and the little house, you want to make sure people know exactly what that means. And then again, add in notes or comments, surprises, things to review again. Some bonus tips, again, hot tips. Basic equations allow you to search for keywords as a first round of coding. So you might want to see how many times the word participation or decision-making come up. But this is not coding. This is just a first way of getting a good glimpse of what are the things that are coming through in the data. Again, not coding, just a quick glance. And then you can use pivot tables to quickly summarize codes. This is a little bit more complicated when you use pivot tables, but it should all be relatively clear. And then our third and final way, which is the way that maybe many of us are comfortable with because we probably use it a lot in our day-to-day work, is using Post-it notes. Now, I've heard some people say this isn't a real way of doing thematic analysis, but I think it is. I very much think it is. I think it's a very valuable way because it's quite interactive, where the other ones are a bit more individual. But this kind of Post-it note way requires to be a team. You can also do it on your own, but the value is often in doing it as a team. So once again, reading the documents first. So if it be an interview or a focus group discussion notes or whatever it might be, reading through it first. And then doing a structured brainstorm for one kind of sub-research question at a time. So you might put on a timer and say, okay, we have 3 minutes to write out all the things that we have read or we remember from the interviews about this, or about this, or about this. And then, yeah, so I try to have no more than one sentence per Post-it note, and sticking those notes on the wall, and then clustering groups together to get the Post-its in the same thing. So you might even have a way of using different colored Post-its for different things. And the other thing I like to use when I do it, if it's a large amount of data, so if you just come back to the field from a large research time, maybe a couple of weeks in the field, and you have a big team, I like to use what's called sends. So the first thing I do is ask what's been surprising about the data that we have, and ask people first, okay, use a green Post-it note, everybody writes down what's surprising, put it up on the wall. Okay, then what are the extreme cases we saw? What are the things that were completely outside of the realm of the normal? And have people write those ones down. And then say, okay, what were the normal cases? And then what are the things that we still don't know, or the gaps or the spaces? I also recommend writing in Sharpie if you're doing this physically. One, it's easier to read on the wall. And two, it requires a further kind of distillation of ideas down to a smaller amount. So if you're allowed to write with pen, you'll write more. If you write with Sharpie, you have to be a bit more precise in your thinking. I like to use a musical timer to make things fun. And you can also use a Mad Lib format to get over writer's block. Happy to share that with you later. All right, we've blitzed, but hopefully everyone is still awake. I've just had my second cup of coffee. That's why I'm feeling top
You're doing great, Jess. That's great.
Does anyone have any questions before we break into groups?
And if it's about a specific one of those one of those options, then perhaps ask your facilitator for that group. And you will get instructions from your facilitator. So Stuart's going to facilitate the first group, which is the underlining option. And the link is there for the Word doc. And we'd like everyone to get involved in this process. So even though with all of them, as it just says, you can do them sequentially, you can do them in a group. But for the purposes of this, we've made all of these Google Docs. So we'd love everybody to be getting in and getting their hands dirty by highlighting and underlining, whatever. But perhaps for group one, you are talking it through as a group. But if everyone could have a go at highlighting something or making a comment, that would be great. But Stuart, I think you might want to go through it sort of sequentially in the document. Is that clear enough?
So you mean that just that you want everybody to highlight at the same time, or to go through?
Maybe you start going through the first paragraph, second paragraph until people have sort of got a sense of it. And
okay.
The people in your group, if they could maybe move to some of the other paragraphs and have a go themselves, but kind of do the first few paragraphs together so people get a sense of the highlighting and commenting process. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And our groups are quite large, so we've had a great turnout today, which is good. So it might be, yeah, we might need to do a little bit more facilitator led than we talked about before. Yeah, totally, that should be fine.
And do people feel comfortable with putting a number next to their name if they particularly want one of those groups? But otherwise, it will be random. And it's going to take me a couple of minutes to assign the groups. So yeah, feel free, just if there's any more instructions for that group one, or if anyone else has any other questions.
Yeah, I'm just looking at David's question, or I'm going to read it quickly. So David Shad asked about advice on balancing the quality and rigor with the time and space that can constrain MEL projects. Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, every research project will expand until the time you have, right? So I find sometimes my best research work can be done in a couple of days. And I know that sounds silly, but like sometimes with that time pressure allows you to really clarify things. But again, the walks are important, the sleep is important, the working together is important as well. And so just because it's a short amount of time doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be, I mean, I know I mentioned time earlier, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be less rigorous or less good. And I recommend actually, if you have a shortened amount of time, to do a Post-it note version, because that can be the most rapid of the three ways. Where you get a group together, you might give them an hour and you say, we're going to do this an hour today, we're going to do this an hour tomorrow. We're going to try to come up with our three kind of takeaways from the data. Please read the data before you come. Make sure that you know it and you're across it before you arrive for our hour session. And then you have kind of 2 hours of brainstorming. That can be a really good way of making sure that you're getting rigor across a wider group of people without passing around a Word document and taking several weeks. So it really depends on your process, but I find that if you're in a time crunch, I think that the Post-it note version can be the most rapid, but it is the hardest to document. So you almost need to have a rapporteur or someone there to take notes and to say, okay, we made this theme and then we changed this theme, if you need to have an audit trail for your Post-it note activity as well. So making sure someone's documenting what you're doing is also an important part of the process, which we won't get into today, but it's important to do. Melita, are you ready?
I'm super close. Thank you for those. The ones that have numbers, I've managed to put you in groups. Each group is big. We're around 10, 11, 12 for each group.
So I think the facilitators will just have to be a bit creative about how we engage.
Yeah, we'll just we'll wing it, and there's just one more person coming in. So sometimes when I've done these groups, people fall out of the webinar, and for some reason it's really hard to get you back in. So I'm really sorry if you somehow fall out. We'll try and get you back in as soon as possible. All right, and then a couple of people literally just joined, so I have to add them quickly to different rooms. All right, here we go. So we're going to have, I'm actually going to make this 15 minutes because, well, that's 15 minutes for the activity, 15 minutes for feedback and wrap up and the dovetail. Do you think that will be enough, Jess?
Yeah, I think that should be fine.
15 minutes is okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he'll be a bit rushed.
Yeah, and just a reminder that everybody should we'll be good. Just make sure the facilitators have the link so that they can share it with the group once.
Oh yes, so in the chat.
Yeah, it's good.
You could just be prepared to either copy those links into a side document or something to make sure you keep that.
Yeah, super. Wonderful.
All right,
All right.
see you soon. Thank you.
All right, hello everyone and welcome back. I hope that whirlwind tour was still fun for you. We had fun in room 3, so I hope you guys also had fun in rooms 1 and 2 as well.
I think that was the fastest 15 minutes of our lives.
Agreed. Yes, I feel like we barely got through it, but that's okay. Y'all did. I'm sure we did great. So the idea is just to give people a little bit of a sample, a teaser. All right, group 1, do we have any kind of highlights on the process, anything? Oh, sorry, I was supposed to show those before. My problem, my bad.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. We want to kind of, report back a little bit about, maybe a little bit about the experience as well, and then maybe one finding. So shall we start with group 1? Do we have a reporting back from group 1?
Does someone want to volunteer, or?
We all volunteer you, Stuart.
Okay. All right. So we're asking here, Melita and Jess, what was the finding that came out?
Yeah, one finding that came out, and then maybe just a tiny bit of reflection also on the process.
Okay. Well, yeah, we got through all our underlining, and so we did one thing. Yeah, we did, and we were about to. You could see from that there was some common things. So one of the definitely the first common thing was probably what they found useful. I think the question was, but there was a support and flexibility was something that came out a couple of times there.
Yeah, lovely. Great. And group 2?
Yes, I'll just quickly share our screen to show you our fantastic work in group 2. So just for the benefit of everybody else as well, we had all the data you saw from the example that Jess put up then. The data for group 1 and group 3 was in a transcript, like a Word document transcript. For this one, it's been added to the sheet, paragraph by paragraph, and then we've got our respondents here, and then our questions here. And so we started coding and found that there were codes such as community engagement and education and providing financial support were some highlights or best parts of this woman's job. And in this code book, you then add the codes in this section. This is the place to store your codes that you've created and then explain them. And then they're automatically connected to this sheet. And then all you need to do for each paragraph is tick the box that's relevant to the code for that particular paragraph that you see in that paragraph. There might be multiple codes for that paragraph. There might be just one, there might be none. So based on your research questions. So yeah, we found that the best parts of this woman's job included community engagement, education, and financial support.
Super. Wonderful. I think I will also try to share my screen, and Avni, maybe then if I share my screen, then you can speak to it. Does that sound okay? Oh. Yeah.
Hello. Hi. Yes. So so our group had the post-it method, and we so on slide 2 we first everyone kind of used one post-it to answer the first question and identify what are the best parts of respondent 1's job. And we did the same for respondent 2. And then once everyone had like enough post-its on there, we kind of clubbed like the similar themes together. So say the first one, the best part, one of them was providing subsidies. So then the second was educating the community. So we kind of clubbed them together. And Jess also told us that we could do this by color coding, like assigning one color per respondent as well. So that can help us in, finding those kind of themes. And then the same for question 2, the challenging parts of the job. So again, we use different post-its to kind of identify, various answers to that question, and then clubbed the similar ones together. So one challenging part was the geographic conditions that came out. And then another was limited budget. And so in this example, we had very small, less amount of information, but Jess also told us a good way to identify, say, the top 3 challenges. If we had, say, 7, 8, we could actually vote using the red dots there to kind of identify the top 2 or 3 challenges. So we could also do that. So yeah, it was a super fun exercise for me. So thank you.
Thanks, good. And I just want to also share the page of from group 1, just so we can we've seen the other 2. So just, I don't know, Stuart, do you want to say anything more as we look at the document here? Nope. Okay, all good. I'm just super. Yeah, so you can see we've got some underlines, we've got some highlighting colors as well, and then some comments and things. Yeah, so it's just, these are just good ways, simple. You can see the kind of the quickness of the post-it note. Again, not good or bad, but you can see that you're able to kind of get into it a little bit quicker, which is one of the reasons why I say if you're needing to do things fast, I do recommend using kind of the post-it note way. The other thing with using a document like Google Doc or Google Sheet or Google Slide, if you're comfortable putting your data there, is the ability to go back and have an audit trail. I mean, really, you have a full audit trail here of exactly what happened. You'd see, especially if people log in using their names. You can either keep it anonymous or keep it with a name. You can check who did what when. You can see if someone goes in and changes something randomly at night to play with the data. Not that would ever happen, but just in case, you're able to have that audit trail, which is one of the reasons that I like to use the systems of Google Doc, Sheet, and Slide. So you can always go back and check what you had as a different version or a previous version as well. You can also do that in Dropbox with Word documents. So there's many different software that allows you to do that, but I recommend using something where you have an audit trail of the different ways that people participated. Wonderful. So we're just going to, I'm going to try and share my other screen. Yeah. So the next kind of question then is, we've kind of talked through, but in the chat, if everyone could now reflect on the process that they worked on, what worked, what was hard. So I'd love to hear from kind of everybody, if you don't mind, plop in the chat a little bit of your reflection on the process. You can also use an emoji if you're feeling millennial to reflect on the process if you're keen. Thank you, Deanna. Yeah.
And because we're coming close to time and we've thrown a lot of ideas and tools and techniques at you, feel free to drop either Jess or I an email, ask any follow-up questions, and we can incorporate those questions and ideas into the development of the toolkit, which is the ultimate product that comes out of this project. So all of your queries help inform us about what you're needing and what you're interested in. And all of these tools will be available on the website for you to download and use later as well.
Yeah.
What do we have, Jess?
Yeah, so people seem to like it, which is good. So everyone seems to be pretty happy with the ones that they've done, which is great, and think it was valuable. So systematic process in number 2 may be more suitable for individual analysis. Yeah, definitely possible, Jose. When I've been using the kind of version 2, if you like, often I go through it once by myself, and then I hand a blank copy to someone else and ask them to do the same process. And that's called intercoder agreement. And so maybe they do the entire thing by themselves as well, and you come back together and you compare. But you can also have that as a discussion. So you say, do we think that this is education, or do we think this is a different type of code? Yeah, so you can do it in lots of different ways, just depending on your skills as a researcher and your interest, and whether or not you are coaching other people as well. So one of the questions around Post-it note was making sure we don't have bias. Totally fair, 100%. If there are ways to involve different types of people in the process with Post-it notes, I highly recommend that. So I've done it in Bangladesh, where we had field staff members as well as national staff members all working together. People could write in Bangla or in English. And what's really useful is if you do it in, if you do Post-it notes, but in Google Sheet, this is a bit of another sneaky tip. You can use equals Google Translate, and you can actually do a live translation of from Bengali to English and English to Bengali. Again, using Google Translate. It's not perfect, but it's a good, quick, fast way of getting translation of your codes quickly. So if you're doing it in multilingual groups, it actually can be done. But that's why I like to involve a wider range of people in that Post-it note exercise, so that we get the biggest number of voices in the room, so that you can avoid the bias. Yeah. Super.
That's great.
I know,
now, there
yeah.
is one other tool that we wanted to share with you, but it will take a few minutes. So we can either save that for next time, or people can stay on for 10 more minutes and hear about the digital tools, so products that you can use online to do this, to support this kind of a process. Does anyone want to make it clear what option they would prefer? Because as Jess said, these tools are not necessarily going to get you a better analysis. They're just another way of doing it, and definitely help if you've got very large data sets. But for small data sets, they may not be necessary, and they could create more headaches than they give benefits. I know, the 1.5 hours passed far too quick, didn't it, Sering? Another meeting, says David. Sering can stay. Yes, this is going to be recorded, and we'll put it on the Water for Women Hub. I think just to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to watch this, to have the opportunity to get to know the tool. Maybe we could just present very quickly these two options that you've identified, and then if people want a longer tour of it or a bit more in-depth discussion about it, they could let us know, and we can build that into the subsequent webinars. But maybe if you spend 3 minutes, 5 minutes now, just giving the quick overview, that will be fine. Thanks, Jess.
Yeah, super. Thanks, Melita. Yeah, so Melita and I kind of recommending kind of two tools. Part of this is based on cost. Part of this is based on multi-user ability, so ability to work across countries and across larger teams. Part of it is based on our own personal experience, usability of the software, simplicity of the software. And so both Melita and I have gone through many, many different rounds of trying to find the best tools. And these are the two that we recommend. Again, it could be, you can use NVivo, you can use Max QDA, you can use Atlas TI. These are all fine. You can use Excel, but these are the two that we've been using in our work. And so one of them is Dovetail, and one of them is Deduce. So I'll just maybe, Melita, do you want to speak to Deduce quickly, just like a minute? We won't be able to show it, but yeah.
Yes, look, Deduce, I've found to be fantastic for teams that are in multiple sites all around the world, and you can be similarly to the first group that use the Google Docs and the highlighting and making comments. It's just a more automated way of doing that. So you're highlighting text, you're literally dragging your highlighter over the text, and then you're essentially right-clicking and typing a word that is your theme, or creating a theme. But then it saves it, so then you can keep on clicking that like as a drop down essentially, or tick a box type thing. The other good thing about these platforms is what Jess was talking about before, about the iterative nature, and you might call everything at the beginning decision making, and then later on you find out, oh, there's decision making mentioned in the home, and there's decision making mentioned in the community, and there's decision making mentioned at work. So if you use this highlighting decision-making code, you can then go back through all of your decision-making codes quite easily, create drop-downs, we call them children codes, and then click very quickly, home, community, work. And so you're creating a hierarchy of codes quite quickly and easily. So it's sort of a bit of a mixture of number 1 and 2, I would say, in terms of the tools. And it's storing your codes and your children codes, and you can change your hierarchy as you go. It then can spit out an Excel, funnily enough, an Excel spreadsheet at the end, which that you then use to really interrogate the meaning of all the coding. So yeah, that's all I can say about Deduce for now, but it's cloud-based, so it's fantastic for international teams and using different platforms. The difference between like Macs and PCs can be an issue for some of the other tools. Thanks, Jess.
Yeah, super. And just to highlight too, if this sounds like a tool that you might be interested in, they give weekly webinars on the actual details. So I just plopped the times. I don't even know what time it is, but you can look at the Deduce website.
Probably US.
US time. Yeah. So there's one tomorrow, and there's even another one next Thursday. So feel free, if this is something you think you'd like to learn a bit more about. They have some great like training and facilitation through the Deduce platform. So I recommend maybe looking into that if that's something you think. And the cost is quite reasonable. Melita, do you want to just talk about the cost?
It's about $10 a month or so. And 1 month free. So you can test it out for free. Super.
Yeah, great. Has anyone used Deduce? Maybe you can plop it in the chat if you've used it before for anything. Yeah, great. And then the one that I've been using is called Dovetail. It's $15 a month for a single user. It gets a little bit more expensive if you have a lot of users, but you can make one user and then share it amongst a group of people, which is easy to do. So it's $15 a month. And then I think it goes up to $125 for 5 users per month. So it does get a little bit more expensive than Deduce. But it's about the same, so it's similar kind of costing for that. Is it 15 per person with Deduce, Melita?
One account, yeah. So everyone sort of shares the same login.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So same with this one. If you share the same login, it's $15 a month, and it is also quite user friendly, very similar to Deduce. I'm just going to open it up for y'all real quickly here on my screen, so you can have a little bit of a. You're getting the live view of my PhD land. This is my PhD land. So you're seeing my brain. But I plopped. This is what Dovetail looks like. This is completely cloud-based. Again, you can use it across multiple different. You can use it on Mac. You can use it on PC. It saves things automatically. It has a record of your responses. So when you come into the analysis, you can see when it was last updated. You can add the goals and some basic, clarification on what you're trying to do in the analysis, like a README file. And then you go into your actual data. And if any of you have used Trello or any other Kanban board type software, it's similar to using Trello. So here you might have interviews, you might have here focus group discussions, and maybe you have here, you could have observations, for example, on a larger larger research project. When you click onto the respondent, here you can actually have different respondents. You could, if you are able to have a photo of the person and you're not having de-identified data, you can even have the little person's picture pop up next to their name. You can add fields for date. This would be very similar to Deduce. You can add fields for date. You can even put their phone number or their email address if you want to get back to talk to them again. And then you have the text. If you are using Zoom or another audio recording system, one of the things I really like about Dovetail is you can upload the audio file, and it will do an automatic transcription of the audio file, and then allow you to easily to code it. Well, if you code it, if you make a code, it'll pop up the actual time of the audio file as well. It'll code it in the audio. So it allows you to actually hear back the part of text that you coded. The transcription is reasonable. I wouldn't say it's 100%, but you always want to read through your transcriptions again anyway. And so I think it is quite useful The transcription service only currently works for main European languages, unfortunately. So it won't be able to do it in Indonesian Bahasa or in Bangla or Hindi at the moment, but there are other options for those using things we've talked about before. And then very similar to deduce, you're able to create a tag. So you might say, want to say educating on WASH as your tag here. It will create a tag and it will tag it there for you. And it will automatically give you the number of times that that's been used. If you click on the tag, it will give you the where, you know, how that tag has been used. Every time that that tag has been used, it will come up. So if you go to your tags, you can move them around. This one's just been popped into an untitled group, but you can only do 2 layers, but you can like one parent and child, but you're able to make different groups. And then see all of your different highlights there as well. Lastly, you can see graphs using either the number of times that something was highlighted or the number of times it comes up in a note or the amount of text that was actually highlighted. So this is 23 characters here. So different ways to have charts, and you can also, again, download to Excel. So just another software, another system to think about. Also, just because brown is a bit of a gross color, we can change it to a different color easily. Just, that was driving me nuts. So you can do lots of different things with color in different spaces as well. Yeah, so we don't want to sell you on a particular product or service, but you know, we probably actually use Excel, Word, and Post-it notes more than anything. But if you're keen to use a software and you find like that might be easier, we recommend Deduce or Dovetail. So I think that kind of wraps things up. Does anyone have any kind of questions? I'm just looking in the chat to see.
I've just popped the link to the hub where we're going to be saving all these resources and the video recording. Hopefully that comes up for you. It's basically in the Mel space on the hub. And just while I was doing that, can you show me how you, for educating on WASH, just the child code for that is, you know, hand washing. So yeah. you're educating the community on WASH, but it's specifically around hand washing. How do you make the child?
Yeah, so it's a little bit complicated. So you actually, for this one, as you make a tag, it becomes a child code automatically. So if you want to make this about educating on WASH, you'll need to make your bigger column here about WASH, and then maybe again you want to make that blue, and then you would need to go in and change this to hand washing. Okay. Yeah. So it's a slightly different modality, but then every time that comes up, it will be changed.
Great. And so it just shows how easy it is to change things. That's great. That's a big benefit because you kind of are constantly refining the terminology, and it's very visually engaging and very simple. I would say that this aesthetic is, I much prefer it to Deduce, but at the same time, I'd have to probably really play with it to kind of do the pros and cons, but it's very visually accessible.
Yeah, that's kind of, I think Deduce is a little bit more rigorous. So, yeah, I think Deduce is a little bit more rigorous. This is a little bit more rapid, perhaps.
Yeah, sure.
But what you can do also, just same thing as in Deduce, you want to describe your tag. So you might say, this is hand washing. We use this when we, you know, for this, we don't use it here. So you have an ability to add lots of different things. And you can have, if you do have multiple people, you can say, Jess, I think this tag is silly, please remove, or whatever. You can add people and you can tag people as well, just like you would on Facebook or another social media platform.
Yeah, fantastic. Does anyone have any other questions about this particular tool? If there's no more questions, we can probably leave it there. There are lots of other options, as Jess said, but we have tried, we use NVivo a lot at ISF as well, and a lot of researchers use NVivo, which is an Australian-made product. But we've found it to be a little bit challenging when you're working on different platforms, Macs and PCs. And it's a downloaded product onto your machine. So having to purchase and download software can be challenging in different contexts. Where can you get these tools? You just go to their websites online. So for instance, the dovetail is probably dovetail.com, is it?
Yeah, and I think it's also, I think Dovetail is actually Sydney based, which I came across today, which I thought was quite fun. So yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Is it the Dovetail app or?
It should be dovetailapp.com, so you can see it in my thing
Yeah,
here.
great. Oh, thank you for putting it there in the chat. And then Deduce is similar. Deduce has just changed things a little bit. You do need to download an app. And I also realized that the cost that I was mentioning before was in US dollars. So it probably is more around the $20 a month mark for
same
$10.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's 15 US.
That's right. Yeah.
For a single user. So yeah, they're not super expensive if you think about it in the scheme of a project, but it is something to factor in across all of the different elements that you're thinking about. There we go. So there's Deduce and there's dovetailapp.com. Okay, thank you 29 people for hanging in there with us. Does anyone have any questions to finish us off? Otherwise, we'll call it a day. Thank you, Sadi.
Wonderful, glad. We always love to hear that you guys have learned a lot. That's helpful for us. And if you have any feedback for us of how to make it better next time, please let us know. Also, send us an email.
Thank you so much, Jess and Nalita. That was really useful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sari.
Well,
we look forward to using these tools with you.
Thank you, Jess and Melita. I learned a lot. Thanks.
Good. Wonderful.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. All the best.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
We'll be in touch with the next stages of the project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Good night.
Thank you. Bye.